God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." What does that mean? So often we read something and then we don't understand it and we just go over it. But what does it mean to be in the image of God and the likeness of God? God is spirit, John 4:24. That is the image of God. We are made in that image. We are spirit beings living in a body. The likeness is the moral standard of God. But how did that enter into our beings? And I know this is going to sound unfamiliar to you, but just listen to me tonight and just go and pray about it. Please don't just throw it out on the dump. As human beings, our brain, when it hears something that we haven't heard before or that we are uncomfortable with, our brain tends to just make it hot air and let it go out. But I want you to hear. So just stand still for 2 minutes and just hear me out the next 2 minutes. God made us out of dust, not of the ground. Who of you have ever tried to grab dust and compact dust? It's not that easy, but God did that. He took dust and He created man. He formed us out of that dust. Everything He spoke into existence. He said, "Let it be." But when He came to man, He said, "I'm going to form man out of the dust." So He spoke the word, and then He said, "I'm going to put my fingerprint on that human being." But then He did something very interesting. And for years I said God did CPR, but He did not. I want to read Genesis 2 verse 7 to you. I want to activate the image and likeness of God in you today. Genesis 2 verse 7. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground. See, you're not made of ground, you're made out of dust. And breathed into his nostrils the breath or spirit of life, and man became a living being. Living is life, being is soul. But he breathed into his nostrils. Why did he breathe into his nostrils and not into his mouth? Who of you have ever tried to resuscitate a person and only breathe into his nostrils? I don't think that is a very clean way of doing it. When I was thinking about it, I thought, oh God, please, no. But at least Adam was clean. He was still pure. So God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Now I'm going to demonstrate something. When you are tired, you will open your mouth and you will breathe in and breathe out. But when you're in your normal day of life, you will close your mouth and you will only breathe in through your nostrils and breathe out. And that is what God was actually doing with Adam. He's like, Adam, I know you're going to breathe through your nostrils. So I'm going to put my breath inside of you. But what is in the breath of God? Have you ever thought about that? It's so easy to think, oh, it's just the breath of God. But what is really in somebody's breath? Sometimes you will stand in front of somebody and you will smell, they haven't brushed their teeth this morning. Or, I think it's time for them to have something to eat. Your breath tells more about you than what you think. And in your breath, if somebody can get your breath, they can actually get your DNA. Okay, that's a stretch to think of. When you speak, there's actually small droplets coming out. And they can pick that up and they can determine what is your DNA. Think about that for a minute. So if they can determine your DNA from your breath, what did God breathe into Adam? It was his DNA that God breathed into the dust and formed man. Yes, that seems so far-fetched, but it's God's DNA that was in that breath. And what's interesting, if you look at the medical side, you will know that when you breathe something, it goes through your nostrils, into your lungs, into your heart. What does Proverbs 4:23 says? Keep and guard your heart with all vigilance, and above all that you guard, for out of it flows the springs of life. Keep and guard your heart with all vigilance, and above all that you guard. So it's very important that you guard your heart. Why? Because as Adam was breathing and God breathed his DNA, his life, his fullness into that dust, it went through the blood, it went through his nostrils, into his lungs, and straight to his heart. And in the heart, something happened, and the blood was formed and went through the whole being. And the blood sent the life to all parts and to the brain. Medically and scientifically, it's been proven that your heart is a bigger thinking organ than your brain. Your brain is only a reactor. Go and look at that studies. And that is why God says, protect your heart. Inside of your heart is the name Shaddai written. And Shaddai is the all-sufficiency of God. It's one of the characteristics of God. So when that DNA, when that breath of God went into Adam, God said, Adam, you are carrying my DNA. You are carrying now my character and my life. That is why Adam could give everything a name. Yes, we've lost some of that image. In Genesis 5:3 you will read, and Adam brought forth according to his image. Why? Because Adam submitted to a different glory. He allowed the words of Satan to enter him, and he breathed in the words of Satan. He did not breathe only God in now. He breathed the words of Satan in. And that word that Satan spoke through the snake entered his heart, and that corrupted his heart. And then his mind changed. That is why it's so important that we will stand and realize, God, I am in your image. You've made me a spirit being because God is spirit. And we have to take care of the spirit of God that he has placed inside of us. The moment you get saved, what happens? You accept that breath again. And it changes your DNA. I'll speak about that a little bit later. For now, I want you to realize that you are the image and the likeness of God. It is God's DNA that filled Adam. It went through his nostrils. Have you ever stood still in a meeting where the presence of God came in, and then you smell the sweet fragrance of a living God? He's the rose of Sharon. And the moment you start to breathe that fragrance in, how often have I stood in a prayer meeting and I will breathe that sweet fragrance in, and I could feel how my heart changes back to hope. Why? Because the fragrance of a living God is in the room. A fragrance that you cannot describe. A fragrance that is hidden for so many people. But as that fragrance goes through me, I could feel hope coming back. I could feel a change inside of me. Why? Because that fragrance of God carries God's DNA. And if you've got the DNA of God, you've got hope, you've got life, you've got love, because God is love. So 1 John 4 verse 8, God is love. So what breathed into Adam? It was love that went through his nostrils, into his lungs, into his heart, and the heart determined where it had to go. Guard your heart more than anything else. As you come more and more into the presence of a living God, the DNA of God, the character, the hope, the fullness of God will become stronger and stronger. And then people will see you and they will wonder, why are you different? And all you can say is, it's the DNA of God that actually shines through me. You are made in the image and likeness of God. May you become aware of the breath of God again. Start to ask the Lord so that you can breathe His DNA back into your being. And as you breathe it in, you'll experience the fullness of a living God. I bless you with the fullness, the image, and the glory of a living God. Shalom.